Hello, welcome to a live stream podcast with Down the Road Show. Hopefully you're watching this live on the official Down the Road Show Facebook page. This is also being recorded for our video podcast on our YouTube. Please go subscribe, like, comment, follow, do all the social media things that you know how to do. Like us on our Twitter, Instagram, and definitely go follow, like, and love today's guest. His name is Damian Legacy, aka thecannabrander. Today we're going to have an amazing conversation that I'm excited about because he's going to give you guys some good pointers for branding and marketing, which are going to help you and your products in general. But this is going to be very cannabis forward for all you cannabis and CBD and hemp lovers that are starting a business or maybe already have a business and you just cannot get your product out there, or Twitter or Instagram keeps shutting down your damn accounts. We're going to talk about all of that today. How you doing today, Damian? Coming in from Vermont. How is things on the farm?
Hey, Casey, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me here on your show, and to all your viewers for that follow Down the Road Show, and for all of our friends that are watching along on Facebook. Things are great on the farm in Vermont. We have a nice bright blue sky right now. It's hot, hotter than it is normal for us. We're indexing around 95 to 100 right now, which is really warm for this time of year for us. Our garden's quite confused, but we're managing. I'm thankful for the break in the rain. We've had a bunch of rain lately, so we'll take the sunshine while we can get it. And yeah, just having a great day so far. It's been spent mostly in the garden, trying to get out before it gets too hot. So
yeah, well, I mean, you know, it's yeah, well, we'll get into climate change later. Let's get into some branding and marketing first, and then we'll get into your backstory on how you ended up here as the cannabrander. So, you know, people have been losing their Instagrams left and right. Like, do you have suggestions for them with their posts that are not going to get them in trouble with Instagram or Facebook?
yeah, it's a great question. And the thing with cannabis that's so tricky is that we think of media, and we immediately think of paid media, and advertising is the biggest example of paid media, right? And so there are laws, because cannabis is still a federally scheduled drug, that we can't advertise cannabis. We can't show consumers promoting products in a way that really anybody would be like, hey, wait, why is it regulated in that way? And it's because of cannabis prohibition, and Instagram and social media in general. Like, they have to very carefully follow those sort of media laws as they apply to things like cannabis and still scheduled drugs. What's crazy, though, is that that we're still in this position. And with Instagram, the thing that gets people shut down most of the time is product, right? Showing cannabis, showing your actual, if you are a business, showing the product you sell, right? Because they say that their platform is not for that. Rather, what is much harder to censor, and where I encourage everybody to go, is the direction of inserting their product into their consumer's lifestyle, and then making their Instagram or their whatever social media a glimpse into the lifestyle and the value that their product offers. You don't have to show the product, right, to show the value it delivers. And so when we think about storytelling in this way and experiential branding, it allows us to use our social media the way that it was intended, and that was to connect to people and to tell about our experience. And so one thing is very easy to censor, one thing is very difficult to censor, right? And so the shift has to be made, really, unless you want to have backup account on backup account, and right, like,
yeah, I lost count of how many backup accounts I have. Yeah.
But really making that shift towards using your social media as a way to connect with people who believe what you believe, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to show the product. But it's a great way to bring in your own personal experience, or the personal experience of those who you share it with, right? In a way that isn't paid advertising. So just make the shift away from selling products and think about what overall value do I want people to have when they come to my Instagram page, for example. And then they're able to really carefully craft and cultivate a social media presence that is intentional and that isn't loophole advertising or loophole exploiting, right? That's another road, that's another option.
Right.
I think it's sustainable, honestly. So it just, the best way to grow and nurture long, sustainable, durable ideas is to just focus on the experience and the value it delivers.
And that's great advice and a lot of good points there. So let's talk about advertising and marketing, and you're talking about paid marketing, and let's talk about why that doesn't work in general these days beyond just cannabis.
Right. Do you have any subscription service where you've maybe paid a couple dollars extra to not watch advertisements?
No, I've thought about it many a times though, but no, because my broke ass can't afford to even pay them to not advertise in front of me. So
thought about it, right? To the point where maybe in the future you will be able to pay to not be advertised to. Generally speaking, I think
which is a good time to promote my Patreon. Go give me some money, people. Anyway, what were you saying?
I agree. Go support. Everybody in this community needs support right now because it is so fledgling, and so like we're all sort of grasping for that place to just feel like we have an equal footing when really the ground hasn't even been established yet. So like I understand, and I hear you. So don't take every opportunity to plug that Patreon. I'm right there. And now I've forgotten what you asked me.
Yeah, paid marketing versus, influencer marketing, because I've seen a lot of talk about cannabis people using influencers and not thinking the influencers are worth it. And there's been some back and forth there and some back channels. And
yeah, so I don't think every influencer is worth it. Let me throw that wrench out there. But so the difference, and I got to give a little bit of my backstory here. A lot of people go to advertising school, right? They go to learn how to create advertisements, or maybe that involves some design elements, right? And so we think people who can build logos or other forward-facing client brand assets, we call them brand builders in a very confused sort of way, right? They're not the brand builders. They're graphic designers who can create for you very astounding forward-facing brand assets. But a brand builder is somebody who can look beyond the one prong of paid media. There are actually 4 types of media generally accepted in communications school, which is where I'm rooted. My master's is in public communications, one of my masters.
Now, take us to school on this, but don't give away the farm by giving all the seeds away. See, I did the cow versus the milk bit as a cannabis reference.
So there's paid, but then there's also earned, shared, and owned media. So what I do with my clients, the companies that I work with, or the brands that I work with, is to create a brand strategy that's rooted in those 3, earned, shared, and owned media. And actually, if you look at it, we're no longer paying as much in for the disruptive advertising stuff that we think we have to do, but do more clever to get around the loophole, to get around the law. No. We don't waste time there. You save money by not buying into the TV industrial complex, right? Like that thought that, well, if I spend more to get it in front of more people will buy it. That's not the world we live in. We live in a saturated world where people typically pay to skip advertising if they can. Advertisements when they come on cable is a great time to refill your drink. Go to the bathroom, have the chat with the person sitting on the couch next to you, right? But you're not actually engaged with the ad. So we have to ask why. Well, who benefits from continuing that, right? And it's certainly not cannabis industry as we see it today, because we're not big enough, because we're still regulated in ways that other industries aren't. So that model does not serve us at all, because we're regulated out of the paid category, which is the moneymaker, which is, right, like if you put it in front of enough people enough times and you're loud, they'll buy it. No, in today's world, we shut it off. And so we work on when we're making recommendations, or when I'm looking for a product for myself, I'm talking to my family members, talking to my friends. What do you use? Hey, have you heard of anything? Like, what helps you fall asleep at night? What, right? I'm looking for my own sort of micro network of influencers, which are just the people that I love and trust and hold dear in my life, and say, what are you using? What do you do for this, for that, and vice versa, right? And so if I know that I get relief from A, B, or C, then I can share that.
Right.
And if it's a good product and it's a good experience and it's a good brand, and I can share it enthusiastically, right? Like, hey, instead of just being asked for my recommendation, I might be inspired to be like, hey, y'all, I know we've tried a lot of stuff, but this one is different, right? So we can't just, it's not just about followers, because followers are not sales. and it's not even necessarily about sales, right? It's about value delivered. But value delivered doesn't end at the number of followers you have. So we have to think all the way through that sort of like pipeline of delivering value, and inviting people into an experience, to a story that we've taken some time to cultivate and think about and be intentional about. Well, then that's us helping share our story in a way that utilizes otherwise what you can't buy, which is enthusiastic customers, right? Like you can maybe buy reviews or weird, I don't know if you've ever been offered a collab on Instagram where it's really just like a discount code and they want you to write a review. And it's like, well, where's the collaboration here? This is a solicited paid review. Let's be very clear about what you're asking for, right? They've stopped reaching out to me when I've explained that.
But no, look, you bring up a very valid point, and you're right, because look, my name may be Casey Murdoch, but I am Down the Road Show. Down the Road Show is me. It's not just a brand to me. So if I recommend a product, I'd never, ever post about a CBD or cannabis product unless I've personally tried it and I know it works for me personally, because I have people who come to me for personal recommendations for their parents and their grandparents that want to get off pills and are looking for alternative healthy medicines, and they know they can trust me, not just Down the Road Show, but they can trust me. And that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. And when somebody has a similar experience, right, we trust them because we trust their experience. It's very easy to deny a business its claims, right? Lots of businesses claim to be lots of things. That's just the truth. It's much harder to deny a person their lived personal experience and testimony, right?
Yes.
And so without controlling what people say, we can be intentional in how we build our brands so that they talk and share about it in a way that we would call positive sentiment, right? We're intentional all the way through. And so people are talking good things about our brands. That's how we get around the regulations, then the red tape and the hand tying of that really very big category that is paid advertising. And now we can really reinvest that money in people and experiences. And it's not just customers, it's stakeholders. Your employees are your stakeholders. They're talking about your company, your brand, just as much as your customers are. If you have a product that is delivered, right? The delivery chain impacts the delivery of the value of your product. They don't care that UPS delivered it late. Your product arrived late. Here, right? Like you have to consider every element of anything that might impede or help you deliver that value to your customer. That's brand building, not designing, not Photoshop, whatever, right? Like designer, like
good customer service is brand building.
Yes, because it's storytelling. Like that person, if I've had products where, something wasn't right, I called customer service, they made it right away. I told everybody about it, right? Like just because you made it right. And that's yes, it should be like, you should think that's the right thing to do. But trust me, a lot of people have to be very intentional about doing the right thing.
Right.
And so if I can help you build those guardrails, as far as brand tools, as far as things that help you make on brand decisions and deliver the value that you have said you want to deliver, then it makes those decisions, that decision making, all the easier for you. And you can really put your time and energy into the new things, or the things that need your attention, the areas of the brand that need to be brought up to speed, or right, like new initiatives, those types of things. It frees up so much because you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
And so that's basically what you do as the cannabrander, is you give these companies a roadmap to follow.
Yeah, so it's a 3-step thing, really. The first part is brand awareness for the company. It's very hard to tell somebody's story when they are very unsure of what their story even is, right? And so the more stakeholders there are, the more potential variations of the story there could be. And so we have to take time to figure out, where are we starting? Right? What is the social sense? Not just likes, clicks, shares, but what are people saying? What is the sentiment, right? And then from there, we can build, we can highlight and strengthen what has been done well, and identify how those brand elements can maybe reinforce other areas, right? Or we build programs, protocols, templates, whatever's needed to address those areas where the brand needs to be put more front and center in the decision making, so that ultimately, when you go through this sort of decision flow chart in your head, you never sacrifice the value that you're delivering for any of the potential decisions, whether it's to save money, to partner with somebody, to hire somebody, to not hire somebody, right? Any of the many decisions that impact our business always impact or should be guided by our brand and that value delivered. So it's a mindset change as much as it is deliverables as well.
No different than actually growing a cannabis plant. You got to be aware of your soil, the air, the water you're putting in it, the temperature. You are cultivating your business and growing it the proper way. That's what the cannabrander does.
I'm a year into being a true hobby grower, like a true devout hobby grower, having plants going 24 hours a day. We're at the year mark. This is my 4th cycle. And I've learned so much from these plants in a year, about life and about myself, and also about cultivating cannabis. Yes, but well,
wow. I meant it as a metaphor for your business, but let's go right into the cannabis.
That too. It is. It's my business grew in my site because I felt I was learning more about cannabis from cannabis, right? So that's a little bit also like the war on drugs. The narrative has been told to us for a very long time, right? The story of cannabis has been told to us, to all of us, from somebody else. And so in the growing of cannabis and the spending of time with my plants, I realized, wait a minute, what if cannabis could tell its own story? And not in the cheeky kind of way, right? Like not in the animated, and maybe I would love to be animated. If you have an animator, let's tell the story of cannabis in an anime. I don't know. But what we can do is, instead of giving, I love education. I love cannabis educators. I love patient advocates. I love the policymakers. It just doesn't drive a lot of actual decision making in human brains, right? Like our biology, like the decision part of our brain is the more primitive part. It's rooted in emotion and feeling. And so I really feel like if we want to drive change, we have to tell the story of cannabis, but its story, right? The true story. And how do we do that without projecting myself or my expectations onto who is he to tell the story of cannabis? I'm not. I'm here to help every person tell their part of the story of cannabis. And in so doing, we're going to give voice to each thread of the tapestry comes together, right? And then cannabis all of a sudden is no longer this big scary thing that the government, right, is waging a war against. It's your brother, your sister, your mom, your neighbor, your pastor,
Your
it's
coworker.
things, right? It's the nurse, it's the mail person, right? Like it's everybody, it's the farmers who grow your food, right? Construction laborers who are building infrastructure. Cannabis is everyone and everywhere. And the sooner that we can share the authentic story and get past the kitschy fad marketing, social media trend marketing, disruptive advertising market, get past it. We need the authentic story to push that true voice, that true narrative. And we're 78 years into the drug war at this point, I think.
Something like that, yeah. No,
About
or 87, I don't know. This is not the show for math.
I know, right? But about, right? We're pushing 80 decades, or 88 decades of 80 decades.
That is a long time. Damn near 100 years of prohibition.
Right. Where that narrative, that story that was told to us has just been reinforced by every system that we create as a society. It's reinforced that narrative. And so it's going to take authentic stories, authentic brands, authentic, right? Like authentic lived values. It's not going to be the Mendocino man riding in with a joint in his mouth that's going to, as the first cannabis commercial on television. It's not going to do. It's not that's going to change hearts.
It's not going to, and it's not going to be the celebrity brands either.
Not the celebrity brands. It's not really celebrity influence, because let's be real. Like celebrities are they're like hotcakes these days. They come and they go, and that speaks, I think, more to just human nature. We put people as a society. We put people on a pedestal, and then expect them to tightrope for the rest of their life. I don't know. It's nothing against those folks, but they're not driving the social change that they think that they are by participating in the industrial complex of paid advertised media that was created for a very specific purpose, which was to make a lot of money for a very few people. So, and it's
like
working.
most businesses, yeah.
So, we can think of this as like grassroots branding, grassroots brand relationship building, but it's about connecting people, right? Like it's about connecting people to what we believe in. I believe in cannabis. I believe in cannabis as medicine. I believe in cannabis as textile. I believe in cannabis as the future of our planet and sustainability and ecology. I believe in cannabis. Right? Like I believe in cannabis, period.
Amen.
And that is all encompassing. And that's why it's so important for me to be able to work with and share the story of the plant in every facet. Each brand, each person, everybody has a story. We don't need to sit here and come up with this grand fiction, right? Like you have a story. We just need to tell it.
Well, speaking of which, then, I feel like this is the appropriate part of the show to tell your story of cannabis, how you found the plant and how it has helped you throughout life.
Yes. Oh, cannabis and I. It's interesting, right, to feel so passionate about something, and it's not a surprise to people that know me, but to, I think, people that have met me more recently, is that I haven't been smoking cannabis for a very long time. I was not a cannabis consumer as a kid in high school or even during my undergraduate experience and beyond. I grew up in rural small town Vermont, and a lot of my male-bodied relatives are police officers. My cousin's a police officer in the hometown that we grew up in. I had other cousins who were law enforcement officers in other parts of the state and other state, right? They went everywhere. And it was sort of expected in a way. Like you could go do other things, but if you didn't know what you wanted to do, then you were probably going to go into law enforcement. And I was an intern with my local police department in high school, right? Like I remember, and with the canine unit, especially.
Oh, wow. Oh, cool.
Yeah, it was very cool. I actually have a scar from the dog, a 4-inch scar on the top of my head. He was sick and he bit me, and it was a very sordid thing. So so yeah, I've been on the biting end of a police canine, even though I was on the good side, as it were, back then. And and so my undergraduate degree was in criminal justice, and but policing didn't really interest me too much, like as a focus. I focused on prison reform in the United States. The
We'll get back to that.
Yeah, the professors that I had at GW were extraordinary sociologists and criminal justice thinkers, in the areas of global. They had experience with global prison systems and trying to bring some foreign justice reforms to the U.S. And being in D.C., it was a very interesting melting pot. It was a great place to learn criminal justice and to know that I was not going into law enforcement. That's what I learned.
Is that where you made your other decision to go with the collar?
Then, so at the same time that I was pursuing my undergraduate degree by day, I was doing some theological studies at night. And so for a long time, I had been called to the church, even though my family was not particularly religious. I believe that I was baptized at the really social pressure of my grandparents, but it wasn't necessarily something that was religiously important to my parents. And I wasn't raised in a house where we talked about God or prayed before, like none of that. It was just none of it. But from a very young age, I felt called to the church. I even ran away from my family once and ran to the church. But it's small town Vermont, so it wasn't like super far. I was on Main Street. It was like a parade, and I just ran away from them because the church door was open, and I was like, I'm supposed to go there. Okay, cool. Very young. And it always persisted within me that I felt like I had been called to something, that for me at the time, that God was calling me to a deeper service to people. And when I was even younger,
I know God did.
My grandmother got sick at a family reunion, and nobody knew what to do. And it was at that moment that I realized, like, okay, I'm going to learn what to do in the event that some person needs help. And so I was 14. I became a first responder and a founding member of the junior rescue squad in my hometown because I was young. That's all right. But at 14, like, I had made that commitment that, like, nobody knew what to do when my grandma needed help. And so I needed to learn, right? If not me, who? If not now, when? And so I became a first responder, an EMT, and then was very familiar with the fire service. And so was volunteering in the fire service in my undergraduate. It all comes around, I promise. And so where I met who would become my archbishop, and had a providential encounter that God had planned. And by the time that I was finishing, I was ordained a deacon at 20. I spent a year in a transitional diaconate serving as a critical care chaplain at a specialty hospice hospital in Washington, D.C. And then I was ordained a priest at 21, which is the youngest.
Which is pretty young, right?
Oh yeah, it's actually the youngest allowable age in our church, and so. But I was never assigned a traditional ministry. Like, I was never a parish priest. That was not my call. I was a fire chaplain. My experience in fire and EMS led me to serve those first responders in a way that was more than just their priest coming in and saying hi every once in a while. Like, no, I was an EMT. If they were short somebody, I was that wasn't my primary role, but the ambulance could still go out. We could still take care of people. We could still do things. And I built a network, a chaplaincy network in the firehouses that I served, so that the faith communities that were served by the fire department could feel like they were giving back to the fire and EMS departments that served them. And so we created this symbiotic relationship building between the fire service and the faith communities. And that was seen, I guess, by God and other people within my church. And a couple years into my chaplaincy, 4 years into my chaplaincy, I got the call, the bishop wanted to talk, and that usually means you did something wrong, and I didn't know what I did wrong.
Right? Oh, now what did I do?
I couldn't figure it out. And they were like, Bishop so-and-so is retiring, XYZ, we need a new bishop. And I was like, oh, yes, Father Joe, right? Like, he's great, pick him. They're like, no. Well, he is great, but no, not him. I was like, oh, okay. Well, how about so-and-so? And I'm just in my mind, like, going down the list, and he's kind of like laughing at me. He's like, no, we've already picked, or we already have a name. And I was like, he's like, do you accept? And I still didn't get it.
That's what makes you so good, at your humility, even in that situation, not knowing.
He was like, we're asking you. And I was like, oh. and as a human, right? Because you can't help it. You react in your instinct, and then you realize, wait, your bishop is watching you. You gotta, like I had this whole life journey lived out on my face.
Ran the whole gambit.
And I had a moment where I was like, oh, what do I do? What? I wasn't expecting this. So, like, what? And early on, I had decided that I didn't ask the church for anything. Like, my ministry was always, like, sacrificial in that I provided for my ministry. My ministry wasn't funded by the mainstream church or the larger church. My ministry was, if I needed stuff for my firefighters, we raised the money. If I needed stuff for XYZ, like, I either provided it from my own paycheck or we raised the funds somehow, some way. God provides. And so I never asked the church for anything, but I never denied it what it asked of me. And I felt that this was a pretty profound ask, but I accepted nonetheless. Was the youngest person to be consecrated a bishop. That was in 2016. And then it sounds a lot, and it was a lot. But at the same time, there was an arc of depression and PTSD from spending my entire formative life in the fire service, right? Like, I was 15 years old doing chest compressions on people. Like, maybe in hindsight, I wouldn't change it, but, like, I understand that I'm different from most people, right? Like, most things that start with "have you seen?" No, I haven't seen that movie. Right? Like, I haven't seen that TV show. I probably don't know that band that you're talking about, because if I wasn't on an ambulance, I was in church. If I wasn't in church, I was, right, like, in the community doing stuff. Like, so I don't have the same experience that I think a lot of people have. I just see people for people, because I spent so much of my life being with people at their most vulnerable moments. When you call 911 for a paramedic, you're vulnerable. You're not calling us there for tea and toast, right? Like, when you encounter a priest, it's a vulnerable moment. They're there, what people go through in a lifetime, we went through in a day. I would be baptizing somebody in the morning, and then there's a funeral in the afternoon, and then, oh gosh, we got to get ready for tomorrow's wedding, right? Like, how do you be happy, sad, happy, right? It's a lot. It takes a toll.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
300 pounds. That was the last time I stepped on the scale. So it could have been more than that. Let's be very honest and candid about that. I stopped getting on the scale because I didn't want to know. Mm-hmm. So I was encouraged to do the traditional thing, right? Like go down the pharmaceutical path, have the talk therapist and the psychiatrist and do that. And it's very difficult to have a talk therapist who doesn't think you're really crazy when you tell them that you're a bishop at 26, right? Like that in and of itself was a hurdle. My age was always a hurdle.
Right.
And so it never really worked. It never really vibed. It never really did, I think, what it can do for people, for me in those situations. And the medicine that I was on was incredibly wrong. It was adding weight, and it didn't feel good. And I was at the end of my rope. I was at the end, and said somebody else that I knew in my life had felt similar things, and they had used cannabis.
God bless that person.
Right? Scary cannabis. The thing that I was told would fry my brain in DARE, that all the way through any sort of formative training, whether it be in school or the church, right? Like, cannabis is bad, says the very drunk priest. I never understood that. So I was open to it only because everything that was supposed to work didn't work. And it wasn't somebody shoving a pamphlet in my face. It was somebody who told me how when they smoked or when they consumed cannabis, they had a shift. And they didn't describe it as a miracle to me. It wasn't sold as some snake oil to me. It was sold as, it might be worth trying. You sound like you're at a point where it might be worth trying.
Because it's a personal relationship and it works differently for all of us.
And so I said, okay, when it feels right, I will try it. But I made that commitment to that person for sharing their experience with me. I said, I will do this, but I can't just, at that point, I couldn't just be anywhere like light up people would look.
Sure, let me go buy a pound. Thanks for the suggestion. Yeah.
All right. Or just see a random bishop sparking up as he walks down the street on his way to another meeting, right? Like, I don't think that was quite the look we were looking to portray. But the opportunity came. We were at a birthday party at a friend's backyard. There was, nobody there that was looking at me in my official role. Everybody was there just having a good time. And somebody said, hey, there's cannabis. Do you want to try it? And I had a moment, like, I went pale. I was starting to sweat. I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is the time. I'm supposed to say yes, but I'm very afraid right now. Like, I had a whole reaction.
What if somebody's choking on a chicken bone and I got to give a Heimlich and I got to save somebody's life?
Something, right? Like, it's this very stigmatized thing. And so I tried it, and I didn't get high like most people the first time they consume cannabis.
Because you don't know what to expect. You have no comparison.
And you're so anxious. I was so anxious going into it that it was like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm feeling it or me or what. But first time had happened. And so the second time was much easier for me to approach.
Wait a minute. So after the first time, a thunderbolt from lightning from God didn't come out of heaven and strike you dead as a Catholic priest?
I'm still alive. It's great. Yeah, it's pretty great. And so cannabis became a wellness choice for me. In replacing the pharmaceuticals that were failing, weight loss began to happen. But with it became a clarity and a sense of motivation. Like, right, you get the stereotype of the cannabis person where like we're deflated in the couch, right? And it's like, don't let this be you. It could not be the more opposite for me, because for me, cannabis gave me the clarity and the calmness in my mind to make the choice to get up and exercise, to get up and go for a walk, to say, I actually am not moving so fast in my brain. I can make a choice right now, and that choice is let me go outside. And so cannabis as a wellness choice led to another wellness choice, led to another wellness choice, led to another wellness choice. I had the opportunity to work with a great friend of mine who was a trainer and nutritionist in one person, and also a cannabis user and advocate. And so he understood that I wasn't going to give up the cannabis for the sake of my workout or my health. Cannabis was a part of my health. And so we started to make small mind shifts, right? Like, well, if cannabis gives you the munchies, eat a cucumber. It's crunchy. It's going to take care of your cotton mouth. And you can eat as many as you want and not feel bad about yourself. Who says that cannabis can't be a wellness choice, right? Like, I started consuming.
I hope the stoners are taking notes right this second.
I started consuming more foods that were better for me. And then we got to a point where it was like, okay, the pandemic was starting. DC was not looking like it was a viable option after 11 years. I didn't feel comfortable moving into another apartment building, into somewhere that was densely populated in the middle of it. So, and I had lost my job in the corporate world that I used to sustain my ministry. And at that point, I had also had made the choice that maybe.
Wait, how old were you at this time?
Last year, 29.
So, like, you've been holding down a steady job. You're a volunteer firefighter, EMT, and a priest. You do nothing but service to people. Sorry, please continue. Jesus.
And so when I lost, and it was actually interesting, I had a very good corporate job. I can't complain too much because like they did allow me to leave in the middle of the day to go do a funeral and come back, right? Like they understood that I was different from most people. But I also was the fire chaplain in the county in which their business was. And so it served them to be accommodating and nice to me. And so the decision to change how I operated, both in the world and in the church, kind of came together in the sense that it didn't feel effective in the ministry that I was doing because I was disconnected from people. It was a lot of paper and policy and other stuff. And so I took a turn towards a monastic life. And so rather than leaving the church altogether, through a period of discernment, now lead a monastic community here in Vermont, where we do grow the cucumbers that I'm talking about. I grow them now. We have
you got a beautiful garden.
Yes, very beautiful garden. And I'm not afraid to say that or shy away from it because it is the monastic like life and cycle that like we tend the garden 5 times a day, and it shows because it's well loved and it's well cared for, and it produces beautiful, beautiful fruit. Cucumbers are very sweet right now, so I can't be more grateful for that. But then with no job, right, and only the idea that, well, if we're going to be locked down, let's make something of it. Let's try, right? So we up from DC and moved to Vermont, my home state, different part of the state. I'm in a different part than where I grew up, but back home in Vermont. And we're tending the land. We live on an active farm, so any meat that we consume, right? Like it's right there, right there. So we are localvores in that way, and cannabis very much inspired that wellness choice, because in Vermont I can grow cannabis for personal consumption.
Yay, Vermont!
In addition to the produce and the spiritual life that we cultivate here, there is a great sense of art and self-creativity and self-expression. Everything that's rooted in the cannabis plant. Spirituality is one of those things. And all of those things can be found if anybody comes to visit the farm. Cannabis, produce, a chapel, right? Like, it's all here. And it's all, it's in service to people, because that's what I know how to do.
Yeah, well, that's obviously your main calling from God in every path and decision you've made. And I forget that you're only 30, because like sometimes, the way you present yourself and carry yourself and talk, and just, hate to use the whole old soul phrase, but damn, sometimes I think you feel older than me. So
I get that quite often. And I lived a lot of life in 30 years because I've been able to observe other people's lives and stories, and hear people share their wisdom in the back of an ambulance, right? You make a choice. You can discard that information, or you can take it into yourself and learn from it. And I think that I am a sponge when it comes to that. I don't believe that I have all the answers. I'm not here to tell your story. I'm here to give you the tools and to be a sounding board and a consultant to help you tell your story. You're the author, right? Because that's always been my role, is to stand with people in the darkness until the light comes, and to say, you're not alone, not alone. And cannabis did that for me. It's weird to say. People say, how can you talk about that about a plant? Well, what do you mean, how can I talk about that about a plant? Like, cannabis is what literally met me where I was, in my anxiety and my depression and my obesity and my failed social and interpersonal relationships. And it met me where I was, and then allowed me to see the path to walk for myself out.
How has it changed your family dynamic?
Interesting question. My family does not care that I consume cannabis. My younger sister consumes cannabis very openly. We love cannabis. But I think it took a little bit of me, like, the first time I showed up to my parents' house, like, with a joint and, like, openly smoked it, I felt the same as when I first showed up at my parents' house after my ordination was in my collar, and, like, I was like, they could see me as a priest for the first time. Like, it was very much like, I'm sharing this with you because it's important to me, and I really don't care, right? It's not a question. It's not up for debate. It's just, this is a part of it now, right? And I am a sustainable weight, in a sustainable place, living as much as the sustainable life as I can. And so cannabis, they know, has impacted my life and changed my story. And for that, they're very grateful for. And I think it was that. It was no bit of educating or pontificating, right, that I did, that changed their mind. It was just the normalization. Dad reaches for a beer. I'm going to go hit my bowl real quick, and then we can laugh and giggle, or catch up, tell stories, whatever it's going to be. So, my sister very much looks forward to those moments where we're like, hey, time to go for a walk, right? So it's brought our family closer together, but in a very we show up as ourselves in my family, for good, for bad. Sometimes we celebrate it, sometimes it causes friction, but either way, like, that's the one thing that I will say that in my family, like, we show up as who we are, and we don't shy away from any part of it. A cannabis consumer, as soon as that became a piece of it, then that was incorporated too. So it brought me closer together, but it also reinforced that, like, it wasn't an infographic or cool, right? Like it was just me showing up and being like, this is normal.
Your
and
true authentic self.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that my grandmother is I have one surviving grandparent, and she is ill, and I'm hoping that CBD is an ongoing conversation, and I'm hoping that just by continuing to witness to wellness, that conversation will lead in a way that she might find some relief. But I'm really hoping that it continues to progress, because as cannabis at large, the work isn't done. We got a long way to go.
A lot of conversations to be had for sure with grandparents, parents, people in politics, all of that for sure. And I'm glad you're on our side of the cannabis story, quite frankly, because your story is compelling. And like you said, we are all the authors of our own story. And so now you have the cannabrander, so you get to help people edit the story, to be their author of their own story. You get to help people edit that story. Let's get back to the cannabrander.
Yeah. And it's interesting. It's very much still like the call to my service in the church, right? It's about, I never believed that it was about forcing anybody to find God or believe in God, or right, like, but if you felt like God was calling or speaking to you in a way and you needed help or guidance, yeah, I can help with that, right? That I can help with, rather than forcing somebody to believe anything. It doesn't matter what creed it is. When it's forced, it's often inefficient or ineffective. And so with the cannabrander, I see the same exact opportunity, right? We can force something, which will ultimately be ineffective, or we can do a little bit of hard work up front, a little bit of soul searching, and figure out who we are, who your brand is, what the story is, and then we can tell the story. But if you don't know what story you're telling, if you don't know, right, every story starts at page 1, chapter 1. Whether it's in the beginning or once upon a time, a story has a beginning. And if you don't know where the beginning is, we can't progress in a way that's intentional. And so step 1 when I work with people is just figuring out where are we beginning, right? What have you done so far, and what has it yielded objectively? And then we can go in and tweak programs, tweak products, tweak the way that we talk about them, where we talk about them, how we talk about them, those different things. Usually it's no one big sweeping change. It's a bunch of little, very small, detailed changes that, when it comes in line, becomes more than the sum of its parts in the value that it delivers. So it's the same. It's about it's helping people. In the church, I help people find God in themselves. In brand work, I help people find their story that's, guess what, in themselves. And then we can figure out what is the best way to tell that story to the right person in the right time. Maybe that's where you need the consulting and the help, right? It's not about, well, let me come in with this 10-point plan that points 6, 7, and 8 don't really apply to your brand at all, right? Like, it's just, I approach it from the way of helping people connect, helping people tell their story, helping people understand themselves, helping people
find pride in themselves and pride in their
story.
product and story.
Yeah.
You see what I did there for your own segue?
And as a queer person. Right?
I didn't want to make the show about that, but it needs to be said.
No, it is. It's interesting. I go back and forth about like, well, just like religion, right? It's not all of me. It's a piece of me. And I am very fortunate to have a loving, supportive partner who, in many ways, makes me feel like I live a very normal life. So I forget that, like, oh yeah, just because he's a man, that's different, right? Like I forget that I'm different because I have an authentic partner who, like, we don't have a lot of the small quarrels that, like, I think. Don't get me wrong, we have very serious agreements and disagreements, but it's always approached from a place of like, we're like, we don't argue, we show up authentically, and sometimes that means you go up against somebody, and then we live in community, and so sometimes it comes down to, let's vote, right? Like, let's vote, and great, we have those mechanisms in place, and so the cannabrander would not be where it is without his help. I tell you that. Whether it's up late at night stuffing envelopes, whether it's fronting the cash or the credit card to be able to say, like, I know, but like I need this to be able to do that, and like, sometimes that's necessary, and so he's there, whether it's in
because that's what a partnership is, give and take,
in making sure that I'm grounded, right? Like, hey, you're it's late, right? Like, or it sounds like you're having a hard time making a decision. Like, can you take a step back from it? Is there something, can I help? Right? These are questions that he very frequently and normally asks, and you're right, it is. It's absolutely something that a loving, supportive partner should be. But I also recognize that I don't want to take that for granted and say that's what it should be. Right? He shows up, and I am very, very grateful and appreciative and loving for that, because I want nothing more than to have all of this work bear fruit. And so that we can make the farm bigger, we can live out some of the dreams that we have together, and so it all right, it all works.
Balance, finding that balance,
and that's what Vermont gives us, right? The people are like, oh, the terrible winter. Yeah, winter is terrible here, but it also has a beautiful fall, spring, and summer. We have all 4 seasons. We live in balance, right? For half the year, the days are longer. For half the year, the nights are longer, and that gives us opportunity to go inwards, right? When it's cold and dark, we can learn about ourselves and do some growth there, so that when it is summertime, we can be outside and happy and enjoying the garden or the river or the mountain. It's all here. It's all beautiful. The cannabis, Vermont cannabis tours. I can't wait. So yeah, it's all of those things, and cannabis has played a big part in his life, and finding balance and finding the wellness benefits. It's, cannabis is so much more than just getting high, right? Like, we know this, but a lot of people need to hear that. Like, cannabis is so much more than just getting high. And so being able to have something that helps you get to sleep at night, that isn't gonna knock you out with the strength of a narcotic, right? Like, something that's going to help you just find focus in your day when you need to be focused on a task and you can't have a wandering mind, right? Like,
helps me listen in on this conversation without my mind, my ADHD going crazy.
Right. Like, it helped. It's a tool with a lot less side effects than a lot of
no
other
hangovers
medicinal tools that we use. And so I'm grateful that as this journey continues for me, and I learn more about cannabis, and I learn more about these encounters that we have in our sort of network that we've created as a community, allows that growth to continue. You can't
especially the learning growth.
You can't just say like, this is what I know and then that's where I'm going to stop. When information is being presented to you, you're like, oh wait, I'm still learning, I'm still learning. And so
I thought I was so damn smart a month ago.
right. And hearing amazing people talk about what they do, hearing Gil talk, hearing London talk about growing, hearing Andrea talk about right, like giving people business solutions, like management, enterprise level management solutions, right? Like that's lacking in this industry. It's a lot of people who are really good at what they do, but what they do is not growing an enterprise, right? I'm good at marketing and branding, but I'm not good at growing a full enterprise with full enterprise solutions as one person, right? So we have to look at our community and say, who can help, right? And so in the same way that an illustrator, a graphic designer can help with forward-facing brand assets, somebody who is actually intentional about building what the brand represents, right? Like pictures have meaning because we assign them meaning. And the graphic designer is the person who creates the picture. But a brand builder is the person who cultivates the meaning that's going to be assigned to that picture. That's what I do. And I can help you find the graphic designer that can give you the product that meets the greater need. Rather than getting a kick-ass picture and then trying to build a business out of a picture, that's really difficult. Like that's a really difficult task. Whereas if we take the business that we've built and use everything from that to influence what the picture should be, well, then the meaning is almost intuitive.
Yeah, no, I'm laughing because I'm just imagining some of the early down the road show logos and whatnot. Like I didn't start with a logo. I started with a podcast and idea and went out and started filming at Comic-Cons and was just like, wow, I like video production, and just kind of went from there and was like, I need a better logo.